What's up, prehistoric cave people of the modern millennia? This is the left coast caveman mentality, the middle ground between primitive being and bro science biohacking culture. We bring you training methodologies and product reviews from the modern day caveman perspective. We are on a quest for excellence in life, business, and mind. Our aim, help you optimize your now and realize your future potential. Join us in the cave of Crockett, California for the left coast caveman mentality.
Wow, YouTube. So if you request to go live on YouTube, which I just did for Left Coast Caveman, you have to wait 24 hours before it'll allow you to.
Yeah, they gotta check your content, dude. They gotta moderate, curate.
Let's see what Instagram allows me to do. I'm gonna tell you right now, man, I'm half asleep on this deal. You know, it was
Didn't get a nap in?
No, it was quite the long day. And then of course ended up at the Crockett Dojo getting whooped on by yours truly. And I did some work when I got home. And here we are. And then I was putting my daughter to bed, and she likes to hold hands when she goes to bed.
Oh.
Do a little cuddle action, and sometimes daddy falls asleep in the process, and that's kind of what happened. I just woke up about 5 minutes ago. So
Oh shit.
Yeah, but I'm getting into the zone here. I'm getting tuned in. I'm trying to see if Instagram will allow me to link our account and go live, but maybe I'll figure that out another day when I have some wind in my sails. But I'll kill the jazz music.
Maybe you need some of that nicotine gum, buddy. That Lucy.
Maybe I will.
Pop one
What's
of
the
those
deal?
in, dude. See what's I got one in. Yeah.
Here we go.
Just 10 chews.
Just 10 chews.
Yeah,
Lucy.
and then pouch it.
Tonight's cast. I like to call them casts, not podcasts. It seems to abbreviating it even just ever so slightly makes it seem unique.
Dude,
Tonight's cast.
It's interesting you mentioned that, man. I damn near pulled off the pod piece too, because pod's associated. It's a marketing piece from Apple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was actually considering it. You might have noticed that I changed up the logo a little bit on the cast, the little image square. So check it out. You might
Left
see
Coast
something.
Caveman?
Yeah. Very subtle.
Left Coast Caveman?
Mm-hmm.
LeftCoastCaveman.com. Primitive well-being through modern hunting and gathering, simplifying, making accessible biohacking. I kind of simplified that little tagline. You mean under conversations? So if you go under conversations, where's that? Oh, you put podcast. See, I had originally called it conversations.
Yeah, no, that was the page I originally set up, but I was thinking about just having it as cast. I think I'll change it up.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, cast is good. But no, I changed. You might have remembered there was a mentality on there. And I just I don't know, man. I like the Left Coast Caveman, just that logo alone. I think that has a better, clear, more clean presentation.
I see that there's mentality on there now.
You see a mentality on there?
Well, mentality is on there so there should be 3 main subsections: nutrition, fitness, and mentality. But then when it comes to so if you go to the homepage, if you click the transcendent man, this is what I refer to as the transcendent man. Here we go. Can you even see it? The transcendent man.
Yeah.
The man.
No. Yeah, so what I'm saying is, I didn't change the mentality piece, but if you look at the logo, where the podcasts are, yeah.
Kind of dope, right? Transcendent man. So primitive well-being through modern hunting and gathering, transcending into your better self, better well-being, simplifying, making more accessible. What are you saying though? If you go to the conversations piece?
Yeah, well, if you just go to the conversation piece, you'll see that I adjusted the logo. Are we filming right now? Because I'm doing housekeeping stuff right now. So,
No, I'm doing housekeeping as well, but it's all right.
Okay.
We can always trim it down. But this is what I have for conversations.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Now, all I'm saying is just I'm making this really complicated for no reason. I just adjusted the logo. That's all.
It used to be touch sensitive. So we got, oh, there it goes. Boom.
There we go. See how it's now just Left Coast Caveman?
Oh, instead of mentality. I see.
Yeah. I think that's better, man. It's kind of confusing how the mentality piece with the podcast. I don't know. I thought simplified would be better.
I agree. And honestly, I was wondering. So I went to the Crockett Cave today. I usually refer to my place as the Left Coast Cave, and your place is the Crockett Cave, and then the backyard is the Left Coast Sanctuary. Yeah, that nicotine gum did give me a little hit, but so the shirts that we have previously made that we've been had sitting around, I got, they just say, yeah, because that is kind of in keeping. Here's the hoodie. That's a sharp looking hoodie, right?
How do I get one of those?
At leftcoastcaveman.com, baby. $10,000 is all you need. Anyway, good to see you today. Good to see you again. Once again, it's Friday. It is 8:30 in the PM Pacific time. Uh-oh. My nicotine gum fell somewhere. And I'll tell you what, I'm thinking that perhaps the whole wiped out feature could have something to do with the heat that's been in the air. So anybody paying attention to the news knows that it's been exorbitantly hot in the Bay Area. In fact, your neighbor came out and, it was one of those things where, when somebody's talking to you and you're kind of trying to edge away from the conversation and get back to what you were doing, like, it's like one of those people that when you're talking on the phone, right? And you're like, yeah, okay, yeah. And they're like, yeah, hey, and they keep like chatting you up, right? She's one of those ladies, and she was like, it was 117 degrees in Livermore the other day, and it was actually cooler in Vegas and cooler in Arizona than it was in the Bay Area of California, which is, I thought to my initial thought was, wow, I wish this lady would leave me alone. But the second thought was, there's something to that. Like, how does that happen? Like, how do you end up with such warmer weather even in the Bay Area than you do in like the desert area that's only technically probably, a couple hundred miles away or something like that. So interesting phenomenon. I'm not a meteorologist, neither are you, but it does dovetail nicely into the topic of discussion today, which we touched on. So in the last few episodes, we touched on cold. And in previous seasons, I think we've touched on like infrared sauna, but this whole idea of like the heat in it. And remember when we touched base on Monday, you were visibly distraught, sitting in the cave at 105 degrees or whatever that was. And that could have something to do with why I'm feeling so wiped out. Is just like you never get, the every single day, like if I'm working out, I'm usually working out in the garage, and it's gone from getting pretty sweaty to like losing 6 pounds of fluid during a workout, which is a substantial difference.
Yeah, there's something to it, man. I mean, I don't know. I'll admit this whole week with the triple digits, no air conditioning, a true cave in effect. It definitely altered my consciousness. Like I wasn't firing all cylinders. I wasn't as get after it as I usually am. I skipped training all week. The last thing I wanted to do after, changing my shirt multiple times here, just from sitting and sweating and working, was go put myself in an environment that might be even more warm, being a mat room with a bunch of dudes wrestling together. So it was I've never actually been affected that way, just from, something like heat. I'll be honest, man, I kind of felt like a little bitch. It made me cranky, man. I just wasn't myself. didn't want to do anything. And I think that might be a natural cycle, like your body just trying to let out heat and like almost a low energy mode, kind of like hibernation, if you will, to avoid heating up any more than already. But of course, true to left coast caveman style and being on the path, found ways to get after it in different venues, some night runs and some workouts with the weights in the underground den of the lair. But yeah, it's interesting, man. It has an effect in a big way, physiologically and mentally. I mean, it's all connected, but.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I know that we've touched on it in the past, because if I go to our Instagram page, or if I go to Mr. Wolf, my primary page, I know that like back in, I want to say when we first started this a couple of years ago, we did a few posts on heat, because we talked about that, like, well, it's hot. What are you going to do? I mean, you didn't do training, but I'm sure you did something. I remember you told me yesterday that you did a workout in your basement, which you didn't go to jiu-jitsu, but you did some kind of a routine. And then we were rolling around doing some jiu-jitsu practice in your gym today, and very quickly in Sapien Strong, the layer of Sapien Strong, that is, in Crockett, California. Sapien Strong. It didn't take long before we were pretty much drenched in sweat. I was, at least. I was working a lot harder than you were, because you were putting that blue belt magic jiu-jitsu on me. But it's common practice. I mean, there's so much more that we could talk about when it comes to this. We'll try to give 15 minutes per segment, but going into a fitness modality, we've talked about cold. We could talk about specific how-tos when it comes to cold and how-tos when it comes to hot. But I think the one that comes to most people's mind is sauna. But then also you have natural environments, like when it's hot outside, or if you live in the desert. And the interesting thing is that, should next week, it's supposed to cool down next week, but if next week were to come, we would be pretty well acclimated by now. Your body undergoes physiological changes, and actually, many net benefits can come from smart exposure to heat. Emphasizing smart. Smart would not be like what I did last year or the year before that, which I know I have a post somewhere. I was trying to look for it as we're talking, but I was going to Round Valley, right? I told you about this before. I pulled up into Round Valley, and in my car it read 99. I was like, 99, I can kind of handle that, right? And I brought just like 16 ounces of water. It's a 4-mile loop, 4.5, I think. Something that I usually jog without any problem whatsoever. I get to the back half of that mountain, and I'm going to climb up. You start to make the climb up. That's like you go around a couple miles, you climb all the way up, you get to a peak, and then you climb down, go through the woods, right? I get to the back half, man, and suddenly it's like a change of wind direction to where it's no wind whatsoever. Suffocatingly hot. It's got to be 104 degrees. And I'm out there, and the first thing I notice, I stop sweating.
Ooh.
And then I notice my skin's real like blotchy and red, and I'm watching my Fitbit, my heart rate starts going up. And I called some people like, dude, like if you don't hear from me in an hour, this is where I'm at. I'm in trouble. Send somebody to come get me. And everybody's like, yeah, whatever, man. Like thinking I'm joking, but I'm like serious. I'm out of water at that point. No water. So what I do is I take my shirt off. Probably not the right answer, but I'm trying to stay cool. And I have my shirt off in the beginning. I put it back on because I'm trying to keep my that's right. I have my shirt off. I put it back on. And what I do is I kind of like do quick bursts from shade to shade, shade to shade. And then when I get to the shade, I take my shirt off and I try to cool off, and I take deep breaths and try to cool my heart rate and keep my heart rate low. And eventually I get to the shade. Long story short, I get out of there. Okay, I get to my car, I chug water, I chug, whatever I have on hand, and I'm literally sick for a couple days after. Pounding headache at night just wakes me up no matter what I do, no matter what I take, like pounding headache. Dangerous. Heat stroke, heat exhaustion, whatever. So heat is nothing to mess around with, but if used properly, like if acclimated and training properly, it has many health benefits, which makes it kind of an interesting topic of discussion. How do you use it? Where do you use it? How long do you use it? What are the benefits? What are the risks? Do the benefits outweigh the risks? Cave approved, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So when I think about heat exposure, and I think, the big buzzwords these days is sauna, which I love sauna. It's not readily available for me, so it's not as applicable. And I think that's the case for a lot of folks. But I think heat exposure is a good way to kind of capture a more available version of this therapy, of this modality, way to essentially stimulate your body. And there's a few benefits of heat, right? So one, just looking at it from an endocrine perspective, right? So one, it can increase levels of growth hormone, stimulate increased levels of growth hormone. Two, it can affect you mentally, meaning I think it's something about reduction in cortisol, if I remember correctly. And then obviously three, it revs up, as you noted, when you were really hot, your heart was going. And that's another piece to it, that your heart rate increases. So it's almost like you're exercising without even moving. Or, if you are moving on top of that heat exposure, now you're getting, a more augmented experience of workout. And there's so many really great studies out there. I think the biggest one, the simplest one to look at is just overall, 3-4 days a week, 20-minute sessions, all-cause mortality, which is essentially science speak for things that kill people, heart disease, cancer, all those things, drops in just substantially across all populations. And this is one of those ones that's been replicated around the world, and probably one of the reasons why you see so many different cultures, especially in Europe, they really embrace the sauna, and including that, in their households, and something that's a part of their weekly regimen.
Yeah, you touched on a couple points, which like the longevity aspect of it. So is it dangerous? Yes. Is it beneficial? It can be. And so how to, when to, where to. So there's some conflicting evidence about what's technically a sauna. So there's the infrared technology out, which I use every single morning, but not so much for the sauna effect, although it does work up a sweat. Every single morning I'm in front of 6 infrared sauna bulbs. And I'm just stretching, so it's good for anti-inflammation. It's good for muscle pain. So in the morning, sometimes I wake up, dealing with a little bit of inflammation. If somebody's putting me in a Kimura and just wrenching that thing down, dealing with a little bit of inflammation, natural, right? So the heat, we talked about cold and 37 or 38. I can't remember what it was, but that heat probably has something to do with almost simulating an inflammatory effect, or you know what I'm saying, because you were saying that cold isn't necessarily great for inflammation because of some reason. So is the heat kind of the opposite effect of that?
Well, so what I do know about the heat and what it specifically does, and once again, back to buzzwords here, everybody talks about heat shock proteins, and I won't pretend that I understand exactly the mechanisms behind it, but allegedly this is some sort of protective measure that keeps your proteins, which obviously we're made of layers upon layers, protein configurations, it keeps them from denaturing, which is just fancy speak for it folding in weird ways that aren't good for structure, aren't great for function. So it's kind of this interesting thing, protective measure your body instigates in terms of trying to protect its proteins, protect it from denature. You think about denature, a good example of that is when you have an egg, and you have the the yolk, or not the yolk, what do they call the other part? Not the yolk, but the
white, egg white,
embryo? Yeah, white. Right. So when you cook it, it changes, right? Well, that process is a denaturing of the proteins in the egg. So I think that's a good example of what that is. And so, and I guess, that protective measure, it extends past your initial exposure. I don't know the exact amount of time that it lasts before you have to replenish and do it again. But, most people, I think most protocols talk about, anywhere from 1 to 3 times per week. That seems to be kind of the magic number. With so many different things, right? Working out. I like that 3 time a week type deal. I think that's a good number. It's damn near half the week, right? If you think about it. And then they talk about the temperatures. About 210 degrees seems to be like one of the consensus where you want it to be in for a 20-minute session. It's pretty hot.
Yeah, that's really hot. So there's some technicalities here. A couple things. I'm going to blast through some really just quick bullet points. So the history. Saunas were used over 2,000 years ago, originated with the Finnish people. It was thought to have been more of like a bathing ritual in a like a sterile environment where women would give birth. Yeah, interesting. And you're right. The sauna, you said 210 degrees. That it's technically a sauna at 158 to 212 degrees. So they would consider infrared light not technically a sauna. You can raise your skin temperature to 104, but some research that I found, if you use or like up to within 10 minutes at the highest temperature, it can raise your internal body temperature by 33 degrees, which seems, that seems like a little bit far-fetched. I think most what I saw was like 104 degrees. Okay, so like it can simulate a fever. They don't say that you don't like, you shouldn't, if you have a fever, think that the sauna will help, but it's shown to kind of simulate the immune response of like a fever to fight off infections or to be preventative, which is interesting. Those who used it 2 to 3 times per week were 22% less likely to get dementia, and 20% less likely to get Alzheimer's. Hot cold transitions in this article, according to it was like PubMed, or I think it was also medicalnewsdaily.com, did not recommend the hot cold transitions. That would be something as like a follow-up cast to this. But I think the long story short, and I was kind of looking up to like how, because we were talking about, well, when you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're bundled up essentially in like a heavy fabric. Well, depending on what fabric you have, but it's that you get pretty hot, and it says that your body temperature can get up to 104 degrees in extreme exercise. So again, I would assume similar benefits, but like without delving into the science, keeping it. So basically, you can read anything on this, and its general consensus is that heat to be respected, but should be implemented because there's many heat benefits. So like if you have access to a sauna, great. Some people do, many people don't. What we were touching on and kind of thinking about was, well, then what's the next best thing? Well, we talked about it in the last cast, intense sweating. How are you going to do intense sweating? Intense exercise. How can you better promote that? Intense exercise, like don't bring in the booty shorts and the string tanks. Bundle up, put a hat on, like raise that body temperature up, like look for that sweat till you're wet. What are the benefits? Anti-inflammatory and all of the other things that are beneficial about the sauna. Anti-inflammatory, better immune system, 20% less likely to get dementia. And I mean, that's something to follow up on, the neurological benefits. But I would say in terms of like a cave mentality, like look for the heat, look for opportunities. If it's hot outside like this, look for opportunities to get 20 minutes, 10 minutes. I did find that old article that this was back in August 7th, so about the same time of year.
Wow.
Right
around that time, we were probably running through a heat wave, man.
August 7th, 2018. I want to read it just because it's why not? It's the same topic, but I think the cave mentality is definitely look for the heat, respect it, try to get it, definitely health benefits, try to get the sauna. But I love this thing on how often do you let elements outside of your control determine your outcome? And it's kind of a cool picture too. This was the picture I took that day. Let me see if I can kill the light and show it. I should post this at Left Coast Caveman, but I mean, look at that. It looks scorching hot, right?
Is that Round Valley?
Yeah. It looks like a freaking death zone. How often do you let elements outside of your control determine your outcome? Conditions, temp, 102, sun, blazing, atmosphere, suffocating. Are you going to stay in, not go on the attack because the fear-filled say it's too dangerous? Let me assure you, race day will show no mercy. And the more you arrest your desire to stand down, the more you build your crush it mental muscle. Here are some tips for training in the heat. 1, be smart. Build your tolerance in 10-minute increments by sauna training or outdoors where you can cool off quickly if needed. 2, hydrate before, during, and after. Add electrolytes, potassium, and minerals. Watermelon sprinkled with Go Ultima lemonade, electrolytes, and Himalayan pink salt make for a nice post snack. Damn, I was actually doing some work back then, man. 3, focus on controlled nasal breathing. Expelling breath via mouth promotes dry mouth and dehydration. 4, keep calm, mentally and physically. Discomfort invites the tendency to freak out. Train smart, pay attention to your body, know your signs and limits. Take opportunities to cool off and lower heart rate in shaded spots. Pace up and stay covered in direct sunlight. It may seem counterintuitive to cover more in direct sunlight, but it helps prevent evaporating of body fluid. Sure, there are many other tactics that I left off, but most importantly, be safe, know your territory, your limits, blah, 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 blah. Be prepared, have a plan. Wow, how serendipitous is it? We're talking about hydration and having a plan today. Have a plan. Heat stroke is extremely dangerous and can be fatal or cause permanent organ damage, not for the novice or unprepared.
Yeah, and also I think it's worth noting that once you are a heat casualty, either heat exhaustion or worse yet, heat stroke, you are more susceptible in the future to actually experience that again. And I remember, my time in the infantry, we kept count of guys that have had it before, and we keep an extra eye on them, especially during adverse conditions, because they're a little bit more susceptible to it. So heat's a real serious thing. I mean, so much. I remember we had this little heat bulb device, and we go out there and check the weather. It was it's kind of funny now I think about it. We had a fucking weather van and a little heat bulb and checking weather conditions prior to going out on a ruck march. And it never really mattered. They're like, fuck it, we're gonna march anyways. But yeah, man, watch out. Don't be a heat casualty. Increase your chance of being one again. Nobody wants to be that.
Well, how convenient it is that we, of the things to do, have a plan and hydrate. And that was just happens to be the topics that we picked today. We pick topics every Monday. We thought these 3 would tie together, but perfect segue into, well, what are those how-tos? Hydration. This is one thing that I was so surprised. So we ended last cast. Again, we try to keep these casts, leftcoastcaveman.com under the conversations tab, or podcast, whatever. We try to keep them consistent from cast to cast to cast. So we're learning as we go, we're developing, we're implementing. We last left on hydration, and just you mentioned some kind of metric. It was either in the last one or the one before that. For every pound of body weight you lose, you should drink 16 ounces of water.
16.4, yeah.
I just threw some random number out. I wasn't actually sure how much weight I lose, and I scale will be a topic that we discuss at some point, because I never use it ever. Generally, every once in a while, curious, I'll just jump on, but I never use it. Like, I haven't touched it in months. Sometimes I more prefer, like, if you're going to do a scale, to know your body metrics, your composition, more than a number on the scale. It's kind of arbitrary, kind of. To be discussed.
If you get the right scale, though, the one I have, it'll give you. It's one of those bioelectrical impedance, not impotence, scales, and it shoots a current through your body, and it'll give you metrics on your BMI, on your lean muscle mass, water levels, which that would have been actually interesting to tie in. Unfortunately, we didn't this time, but
we should follow up. That's something because we're trying to keep it 15 minutes per topic. That'd be a lot to chew off, because I will nuke that one in the books for a topic to discuss. The scale. I believe I already have it on our topics list, but I'd never touched it. But so the other day when I did that workout in the garage, I posted it, Left Coast Caveman Instagram. It was a Discovery Series arms and back. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. I lost 6 pounds, dude. I was like, randomly just was like, well, let me weigh myself and see if there's something to this. I thought I'd lose like a couple pounds, 6 pounds. And that was with drinking a half a gallon of water during the exercise. And so to drink another half gallon to properly rehydrate took like a conscious effort. I thought I drank a lot of water during the day, and I probably do. I'm sure I did. I drink a lot of water, but for that to be a metric that I had to hit. And then I'm sure there's many other surprises out there that you were starting to touch on when we were just casually conversating today that are also equally necessary to get outside of just the water metric.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to even think just like, all right, well, how much water should I be drinking a day? And I want to electrolytes, all that. Before I even get into it, I want to caveat with the fact that this is highly variable across individuals, right? So it's one of those ones where you really have to self-experiment to find out what's right for you. And I think a lot of it's very intuitive, as in like, oh, you're thirsty, or, you're maybe craving salty foods after a workout. So there's subtle signs that'll give you an idea of, hey, maybe I need to upregulate my intake of a certain mineral or whatnot. But so if you look at Mayo Clinic, they talk about, all right, and once again, whenever you look at any of these averages, or RDAs, like which is the recommended daily allowances, just keep in mind a lot of times this is based off average population. And we all know that, and you came up with a really great term for this the other day. What is this? Would you call it the standard American, or what was that? You coined a new term.
Oh, shoot. I can't remember the context of the conversation, but I vaguely remember what you're talking about. Like just basically a catch-all term for just like the standard American way of life.
Yeah, well, like SAD stands for Standard American Diet, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
But anyways, so pretty much when you're going
typical
off the
human
averages, what was it?
I mean, your typical human being versus your supreme being, like achieving greatness. It was the word for whoever your mid-level human is, and we're aspiring to be
right
high-level human. But yeah, you're right. Was that on a cast?
Yeah, it was last time. But
no way.
So one way to look at it is just when you're going off of these metrics, right? Just remember that's based off averages, and the average person isn't very active. So their intakes and are going to be much lower compared to somebody that's getting after it. That's exercise. That's an athlete works out anywhere 5-6 days a week. So you'll probably have to adjust based off that. But like for men, quick and hard one, 4 liters a day. Think about like a 1 liter bottle of water. Like you go to a gas station, you get it's not the small 16 ounce, but it's the next level up. So you want to think about 4 of those a day for a man, 3 of those a day for a woman. And
that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's a lot, man, because you talked about, you did almost a gallon during the workout and after the workout. To me, I mean, I don't know what that conversion is, but that sounds like an awful lot of water to me.
Half a gallon.
Yeah. Okay. So a full gallon though, all in for that during workout and pretty much right after, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of water.
Well, I mean, no, it was the half a gallon came during the workout, and then like it took me the rest of the day to get through the other half a gallon. You just set it down, you're kind of forgetting about it. Whereas if you're in the middle of a workout, you're sweating, you're thirsty, like you're chugging it. I do anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, just looking at that 4 liters, because obviously we're not Europe, so we don't work well with the metric system. So I did an experiment trying to convert that to glasses. So I did like 2. I measured out a cup and I added that to a glass. So one of my glasses is essentially 2 cups. So anyways, long story short, 8 glasses of water roughly equals about 4 liters. So they weren't too far off of that 8 glass of water a day type thing. That slogan. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, man. So obviously hydration, very, very individual. You're gonna have to find out what you need, what you don't. I think the biggest aha moment I had, because I generally don't take a lot of supplements. I'm not a fan of supplements, although I realize that there's probably some really great ones out there, and we'll explore further. I'm very selective with what I buy and what I experiment on, and which ones I actually engage in on a daily basis. And electrolytes aren't one that I normally do. And as I started reading more and more about it, I was like, maybe I'm missing something here. Specifically, as much as I sweat and, some of the issues I've had with health, with, my heart kind of feeling weird or just overtrained. And, I think there's really something to electrolyte supplementation. And, you look at salt, like your sweat. You look at, the amount. I mean, I don't know if you ever sweat and you can actually see the crust. Do you ever get that? You ever seen
No.
that? Okay, yeah.
Nope.
Back to individual differences. Some people sweat more salt than others, but sodium is a huge excrement, a huge composite piece of your sweat. Which
I think
really,
if I started sweating crust, dude, I'd freak right out.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Like I've never sweated like and gotten crusty.
yeah.
Sometimes
yeah.
I'll sweat. Sometimes when I'm sweating, it'll burn in my eyes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But I
So
mean, that's got to be like the salt content. I wonder if salt, I wonder if your brain as an organ uses a lot of the salt and it just seeps out of your forehead. Because I mean, sometimes when it gets down in my eyes, I mean, it burns so bad, like I've got to do something about it. You know, like it feels like highly concentrated salt.
well, yeah. I mean, it's like you ever think about your eyebrows? What do you think those things are there for?
For salt.
To keep the salt, keep the sweat out of your eyes. Yeah, yeah. So
I think it's more. I think your eyebrows. We'll talk about that too sometime. I think eyebrows are for keeping the sun out of your eyes. I think it's for it's a sun mechanism.
could be. I don't know. I'm bullshit over here.
There's salt windshield wipers.
Yeah, and sometimes they fail, man. There's a point where they're overwhelmed by the flood.
I've got a double-blind study that shows like your right eye, the dark eyebrows. No.
Nice try.
They're better at, because our people were from Ireland, so you're a fellow brethren of the Irish clans, but we would have been salt in the air blowing on our face, so maybe there's something to that. Some people do have really like thin and fibrous type eyebrows and like barely noticeable, and some people have thick, and some people have like the freaking unibrow thing going on. And it would be interesting to figure out the geographical origins of those genetic traits.
Yeah.
And see if it has something to do with salt getting blasted in your face. We're really going off one. So let's reel this thing back in terms of like,
all right.
So what specifics? My questions are, because I didn't delve into this as deeply as you did. And you were texting me this week, and you were like, dude, I can't wait to talk about this because I'm noticing some like there are some specifics that are key and critical. And my thinking is this. I've clearly salt is one that everybody knows, like, because a lot of people will eat pickles or drink pickle juice afterward to prevent cramping. I was looking at the sodium content. Like the sodium content of a pickle is like 200 milligrams per pickle. That's freaking a lot, dude. And so immediately after that workout, I ate 2 of those dudes. 400 milligrams. That's more than I'd get probably in like a whole. That's like my day. That's what I'd probably use in like a day, dude. I don't eat a lot of salt. I try to avoid it, similar to you. Maybe that's not the best thing, but like I always take I usually take like a hit of the element. We'll do a product review of a let's say we'll take a day to do a full spread of just different electrolyte supplements and what's in them and why. But here's one thing. Here's a couple things I want to throw your direction and see what you think of from your research. So I usually do the element. That's my preferred one because it has like a full panel of minerals and potassium and zinc and all this kind of stuff. And of course it has some sodium, not a lot, not as much as those pickles did, not even close. And then I'll avoid the one that I think it's like liquid or it's like IV or something like that because it has sugar. And I've always thought, yeah, you got it right there, that one. And I've always thought, well, I don't really want to have one with sugar in it. That can't be good, right? So what do you take? And I've also, but what I usually take, and I don't have the brand here. I'll get it from Wholesale Nutrition down in SoCal. Love that place, by the way. My primary stop, Wholesale Nutrition. I'm going to tag them in this post and just see if I can, partner with them in some way. I love their product. And they do protein donuts, which is the only place where you can buy the protein donuts. But they have a supplement that's like BCAA, EAA, and electrolytes. And I've read somewhere in literature, I think it was, I can't remember where, but like the primary cause of bonking out in like long marathon and distance running is like not as much in the salt and sugars and those kind of things. Like you can be chomping on the blocks and the cliff stuff and all that stuff, but you'll still bonk out if you don't have proper essential amino acid balance. So amino acids, sugar, salt, vitamins, minerals, whatever. What do you find is what have you found so far as like most critical?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first off, when you sweat, the most prevalent electrolyte you're sweating out is sodium, right? So I think that's an important piece right there. Now, obviously, when it comes to electrolytes, there's a few different kinds, right? You got your sodium, you got your potassium, you got your calcium, you got your magnesium, right? So there's 4 of them. The one that I want to focus on the most, and I think it's worth looking into because this is the leading, I got some in there, leading ingredient in most electrolyte supplements is going to be sodium, right? And it's because that's the one you need to replace, the one you lose the most of, and that's the one you need to replace as much of. And so talking about salt, and I share that same sentiment of trying to limit the amount of salt I take in. And I think I was going down the wrong path, the wrong approach, especially considering my activity levels, in the heat. And so just looking at regular RDAs, and remember, this is for like average people. So the RDA for sodium is 2,300 milligrams.
What's RDA mean? Recommended daily allowance?
Daily allowance, yeah. 2,300 milligrams. Right?
2,300 milligrams?
Mm-hmm.
The maximum allowance of what? Salt?
No, it's just recommended daily allowance. So it's not a maximum. It's just like recommended. Like you should be at that level.
You probably 2,300 is probably because I think 2 pickles is 400.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you get a lot of sodium throughout the day without trying. I mean, even meat has sodium, I would think. Like
if you add it, you add salt. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much like in a natural piece of meat unseasoned, but you look at many of these supplements, these hydration supplements, and they're, I want to say anywhere from 300 to 500. I know the Element one is really high. I like Element a lot. Unfortunately, it gives me some weird like heartburn type issues. It doesn't work with my gut that well. But that one had the largest amount of sodium. So long story short, sodium's super important. Make sure you get it. I say and we'll do a review. We owe you guys a review on different hydration supplements out there. But they're not all created equal. They all don't contain all 4 major electrolytes. And what I've seen, most don't have magnesium. Most don't have calcium. And I'm looking through the ones I have here, and like Liquid IV does not have any of those. So I thought that was interesting. And if you not to get too deep into the science of it, but calcium and magnesium, those are more involved like inside the muscle, and those are more involved in like the relaxation phase of contraction. So could be some linkages there between like why we get cramps. You start depleting calcium and magnesium, and then you start cramping up a little bit. And there's a few different theories on how cramps arise, which it's still not even settled yet how a cramp. Think about this: in the modern day of science, we can launch people to the moon and beyond, and we still don't know why our muscles freak the fuck out after working out and start cramping up, especially at night in the calf. Right? You ever have one of those?
Yeah, usually in some kind of dehydrated mode. I mean, I'll notice if I'm do a long event or a Spartan race or something like that, or I'm training a lot, and probably not. Like that's the thing. So we have metrics around. All of this sounds like it can be solved for. I've never taken a serious approach to my hydration. I've never taken a metric approach to my hydration. Like I need this many milligrams, like specific. Like we all look at labels and read them. Like why not use that information for your benefit and prevent those kind of things from happening? So we know the water metric, the 16.4 per pound of body weight loss during exercise. And you could probably, through repetition and consistency, develop sort of a working knowledge of what your body does. What would be those metrics around the 4 key elements that you talked about? And where does sugar come into play there too? And essential amino acids. I think topics for follow-up, you know what I mean? Like to determine what is that sweet spot. So like you said, it'll depend on the individual. I mean, maybe I leach more salt than you do.
Yeah.
Or you vice versa. But there has to be some kind of like at least like a minimal benchmark.
Yeah. And so I want to do this. And one of my plans is to eventually make my way down to Colorado, down to Scratch Labs, because they provide a service there. Well, they'll assess your like the salt leakage, the amount of electrolytes you leak from like working out. They have this sophisticated equipment to do that. And so you get a better idea of like, oh man, am I high, do I leach out a lot of electrolytes during workout or maybe not so much? And that can help dial in like what type of, all these myriads of different hydration beverages might be, more suitable. And to go back to the sugar in these things, once again, man, same way. When I would always buy the hydration ones that didn't have the sugar in it, because like, oh man, generally speaking, I stay away from any sort of additive sugar. I mean, it seems to be a really good heuristic, right? Fructose, sucrose, all that stuff. Just fucking stay away from it. Get it from natural sources. But I was listening to this. I think it's a CEO or the guy that founded Scratch. He's an interesting podcast, and he talked about why they add sugars, why they add fructose to their hydration beverages. And one of the reasons for this is it once again, I don't want to get too deep into the science of it, but like it's something to do with osmolarity, meaning like we all know about concentration gradients where water will go from a place of low concentration to high concentration. So if you have a sports drink that's say like over 6%, and I guess Gatorade metrics around 6%.
6% what? Sugar?
Yeah, like all these different solutes in there. It's a heavy substance. It can actually pull water from your body. So you think about the lumen of your intestine, your small intestine, where you do all the hydration absorption. It can actually pull water from your body out, and that's why some people get like some sort of like gut discomfort, diarrhea, which I've definitely experienced as well. So if you're trying to hydrate and you put in this concentrate that's higher than it should be, on the scale, you can actually dehydrate yourself a little bit. So I thought that was really interesting. They take an approach where they keep it about 3 to 4%, and they include it's like, I forget what the exact ratio was, but it's a glucose and fructose mix. And I guess inside your gut, you have these receptors that once the glucose and once the fructose get in there, it opens up the passageway for more water by 200 times to actually enter your system, enter your small intestine and be absorbed by the body. So it helps with overall hydration. I thought that was really interesting.
Glucose and fructose. So hold on a second, because you just changed my whole world. Because I haven't drank a Gatorade in probably years because I thought garbage.
Yeah.
You're saying not so much?
Well, take it for what it is. This guy's, he's pushing scratch, right? Not Gatorade. But yeah, his claim was that it's too high in its solute concentrate. So you want to keep something. And once again, if you look at any of these packages, how are you going to know what the concentrate is? You can't. It's not discernible on the package. Okay, so take it for what it is. But something a little bit light, and it just makes sense from a concentrate. If you're looking at just standard definition of osmosis, right? Water flows from low concentration to high concentration. If your solution that you're ingesting is too high of a concentration, water will flow from your body to that lumen and be forced out your body, through your butt. So you don't want that. That's bad. That's opposite.
All right. So I'm thinking we've covered everything from left coast side of the spectrum to caveman side of the spectrum. Left coast side of the spectrum would be paying somebody, a scientist, to give you like a full body metric and having a specific metric built for you. If you have accessibility to that kind of thing, all for it. But for the sake of the left coast caveman, I would say like where we could arrive at a middle ground between the extremely complex and just the practical thing that's resource ready for anybody here, it would be, look, there's some key elements that you want in a pre, post, during hydration beverage. I'll reverse this and post it in the description, in the timestamp description, but glucose, fructose, those 4 key elements that you were talking about, salt, magnesium, calcium, potassium, making sure that it's all inclusive, but like make yourself a little mix, like don't do the straight Gatorade because it's, you want the glucose and fructose. If you can find that in a supplement, we'll do a complete panel of like different supplements and arrive at one that we, a CAVE approved scale based on this rubric. But like, you should definitely incorporate that apart from getting a body scan or whatever done. Like, to be smart about your hydration and like make sure that all of those things are included in it. And the sodium thing, to me, like a quick shot of boost for sodium, 400 milligrams and 2 pickles, and it tastes good and it snaps and it slaps and it cracks and it pops and it slides in,
Yeah, is that what it does?
It seems like the right answer. A good kosher deal, old or new, but the point is, like, CAVE approved. We'll post it something, and this will be a follow-up discussion during our we'll have a panel of hydration products. But for anybody like who happens upon it to know like what's the CAVE answer, what's the CAVE implementation of this nutritional modality, it would be that include all of the things that are in the description, and but just watch the concentration, make sure that it's a good balanced mix. To me, I can go look at my pool and find out if it's out of balance. If it's super sweet, super thick, super high, you can probably safely assume. Even Gatorade to me like hits a little too sweet. Water it down. Put a little sprinkle of powder in there. Don't put 5, 6 in there. Like use the recommended amount on the bottle, maybe a little less. Even if depending on the level of your exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I think just one last thought to keep in mind is that, and as you experience as well, as little as 3% of body weight loss during activity affects performance, right? So you got to have a plan. You have to have a rehydration plan. And I think that plan should definitely include during exercise some sort of electrolyte mix. And so much so that I even believe before and after it may have some credence to include electrolytes in your rehydration. And what really piqued my interest in this was the fact that they did a study on, these ultra endurance athletes, and they were able to test their electrolyte levels non-invasively prior to race. And they found that most of the athletes there, a large proportion of them, were already in a hyponatremic state, which fancy speak for they were already like depleted of electrolytes. And it's like, well, how the fuck's that happening? Well, these guys are, they're overachievers. They're ultra marathoners. These guys take it to the extreme. Well, they also take their hydration to the extreme and to a fault, meaning that a lot of them most likely were drinking loads and loads of water prior to activity, which was flushing out their electrolytes to a level. So they were essentially starting out the race dehydrated, even though they were technically hydrated with water, but they were depleted of electrolytes. That's interesting to me. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, how to avoid that, right? I can't tell you got to take these things, and I can't say, oh, the experiment continues on the self body, but this is something that's really piquing my interest, something I'm including going forward just as a test. I think it's worthwhile. They're not expensive. They're available everywhere. They taste great. I think it's worth a try. And, it's funny, just anecdotally speaking, it was 104 degrees the other day in my house included because I don't have insulation. And I decided to do a yoga session because, didn't make it to the jiu-jitsu gym. And as I've never sweated to this degree in my life. I mean, it was just a rainforest of drips everywhere. It was just raining off my body. And, 45 minutes, 50 minutes in, I'm almost done with it. Dude, I was starting to tap out from like just holding my hands above my head. Like I was kind of panicking a little bit. And just in thinking about this, how much electrolytes did I lose during that hour of just sweating, just the most profusely I've ever seen in my life? Probably a great amount of it, right? And I'm sure that's a part of the reason I was experiencing a performance decrement based off losing electrolytes, losing body water, right? So I think it's interesting, man. And anybody that wants to perform well and perform safely, I would say this is something to definitely look into and experiment on the self.
Yeah, and another topic I would say for discussion that you can expect to hear on this cast, which would be, we've got lists galore of topics, would be water in general. Because a fascinating thing about the need for this supplementation is, did you know water like Evian water, which is naturally sourced through glacier deposits, has more naturally occurring electrolytes in it than a Gatorade? So it's like, why do we need all this stuff? It's because the water sources that we have are stripped of all their minerals and stuff. But we have to move on. It's been an hour and 50, and we've mentioned several times that we on this cast, we do a fitness modality, a nutritional modality, and a mentality every single time. And we keep, it just happens to be, and we just came off of a cast where we talked about commitment to the calendar, and we talked about immediate implementation of action for the sake of visualizing your ideal life. And whatever that is, I want to learn to play the harmonica. I want to speak another language. I want to be happier, healthier, have less pain. I want to wake up earlier in the morning, whatever it is. We talked about commit to the calendar, immediate implementation as a way of moving towards that ideal life. And so the question arose where it was for cave meditations. Well, when is it an appropriate time to plan then? Because even during this cast, we've talked about, immediate implementation can get you in trouble. I want to go on a run. There's Round Valley. I don't care that it's 102. I'm just going to go out and do it. But I had been training for months in saunas because I know of the benefits of heat shock protein. Had I not been, I would have been in trouble that day, man. And so having a plan is important. And I want to share a video I made this morning at 3 a.m. as an introduction to this topic, mainly because I don't remember what I said this morning at 3 a.m. and I'm kind of curious, but it was on this topic. So let me see if I can pull it up for you.
Something isn't going according to that plan, should you ever replan? Plan your work, work your plan. When is it advantageous to plan versus a hindrance to plan? Is there value in going with the flow, following inertia, just acting on intuition. Only when you can see the vision of your ideal life before you can you lay out the steps. And only when something isn't going according to that plan should you ever replan.
I like that. Plan
So-
your plan.
Yeah, I mean, like most corporate nomenclature, I have beef. Or I find value in it, but I have a strong counter current that I've found to be more productive, particularly in sales or any kind of creative endeavor. Or art, which sales certainly is more art. I think it's like an equal mix of system and art. And I think life ought to be. Most people go with a system or a system that somebody else sets for them and just goes through the motions of it like a cog on a wheel, rather than having any element of art, and completely forego creativity in general, which is the cause of a lot of ailments. But the idea of having this plan, and basically what I'm saying is like this idea that have a plan and work your plan as the way to success, and then this arbitrary, well, then replanning once a quarter. You should only replan when you've noticed that there's a hindrance to your plan, but you can only have a plan when you have like a vision of your ideal of what you want of any specific object. And that can be a multitude of things along your path, but ultimately you have to take time to meditate on what that is down the road, way down the road, and see the steps back traced to it. Okay, what's next? How much do I need? What's the next move after that? Well, what do I need to do? And you don't ever know that what you're going to do is going to work, but that's when you almost replan and pivot every hour.
Yeah, micro adjustments.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, once again, I think the overall plan is more like the structure. It's the scaffolds. It's important. You have to set that out. That has to be one. It has to be a strong why, and you have to have a strong vision as to how you're going to get there, and plan the steps you're going to take. But also realize that there's going to be numerous micro adjustments made along the way, and it is a slippery slope, right? Because some people could fall into these micro adjustments, and all of a sudden, it's like if you're shooting, you're at a firing range and you're shooting close up. You can be a little bit off and like still hit relatively close to target. But as soon as you put that target 300 meters out and you're a little bit off, well, as you go further from the firing device, from your firearm, that fucking difference adds up over time. So you have to be somewhat careful, somewhat cognizant of the effects of those micro adjustments, especially if, to the self-deceivers out there who can justify, just this one time I'll fucking have, some cheesecake. And it's my Friday thing. I got to reward myself. Before you know it, man, it's something you're doing fucking after every bad day, after, your boss yells at you, your fucking kid gives you a side eye, whatever it is. So I think you got to be somewhat careful in that, but also, and a good example, like this week, and I'll admit, I kind of battled myself on it. I can't remember the last time outside of being sick or injured that I didn't go to jujitsu. Now, granted, we got our rolls in this morning, and fucking that was awesome, man. So I'm glad that snapped me back to my senses. But just due to the temperature and just the way it was affecting me, and it didn't see. And I'm not saying it wouldn't have been safe to train. It probably would have been more than safe to train. But I made micro adjustments, saying, you know what, I'm not going to do that this week. And of course, I did yoga. I did a run at night. I did weight training. I did other things.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Did you say erotic night?
Erotic night. No. No, it didn't.
It sounded like erotic night. I'm going to repeat it. But what did you say? Did you say a run at night?
Yeah, ran at night. Yeah.
Okay.
No erotic nights. Well, I mean,
although that can certainly compensate for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, well, we had some erotic time in the lair this morning, man. There's some good compromising positions there. But yeah, man. So I made some micro adjustments and to use a fancy word, I periodized this week, right? So I shifted gears a little bit and worked on some other aspects of my game. My mobility, my cardio, and I think that's fine to do that from time to time, but not losing sense of like, because I skipped this week doesn't mean next week I'm going to skip more days, or you know what I mean? Like the path is still outlaid before me. And I think you have to be your own arbiter in terms of, you know, how are you going to micro adjust, right? And does it stay true to whatever purpose or goal that you have? I think they're fucking important though. Sometimes you have to listen to that intuition, and there's a lot of folks out there like, fuck that, you train no matter what. You're always on, you know, like every Tuesday's fucking arm day, every Wednesday is back day. But my contention with that is that's how you get injured also, is if you're always doing the same thing all the time, right? And there is some magic to it. I love the discipline part of it, but I don't know if that's a smart way to train, right? And I don't know if that's a smart way, you know, applicable outside of the mats, outside of the weight room. I think there's something nourishing to the mind when you do kind of change it up a little bit, and you do make those micro adjustments based off sometimes external factors like weather, or maybe you got a business trip going on and you had to adjust. You usually do jujitsu, but you're on the road, so now you're gonna do some body weight stuff, you know, at a park. Or so I think it's important to allow and almost welcome those micro adjustments. I don't think they're a bad thing within the realm of, you know, the overall picture.
Correct. A few things I got to back up on here, because like everything that we do here on the cast, it has an element of serendipity to it. So how do you know when you're on your path? You can see this article at leftcoastcaveman.com. The path. Google leftcoastcaveman.com, the path. And a subsequent article on micro decisions move mountains. And essentially, we've touched on a few things. So that's your ideal life. How do you know when you properly have your vision set? If you don't, then that's the first step, is properly aligning that vision, properly alignment. And then take steps. We talked about immediate action, implementation, commitment to the calendar, but those are soft steps. I mean, those are ultimately just creating inertia and then allowing yourself to be open for feedback. Okay, is this aligning with my life? Is this moving my life towards better well-being, or is this moving my life towards less fulfillment, less stress, or more stress, more anxiety, more fear, more pain, what have you, more ailments? Take a mental adjustment of that. Okay, so that tells you something about your feedback. And then you mention, and that's you. I love how you use the analogy of target, because the root word of sin, which is commonly referred to in biblical language of the Judeo-Christian religion, comes from the root word of something that means off target. And so there's something like deep about that. That has been written about and through a myriad of interweaving, interconnected, interrelated iterations of the human subconscious and conscious experience of this idea of being on target. And here's the rules. Here's the scaffolding, as you referred to it. Which I love that word, because what do you do with scaffolding? Well, you then fill it in and make the structure, but you always have a vision of the scaffolding. So it's like, well, when that scaffolding, if that scaffolding needs to change in some way, like that's a significant pivot. That's when it's time to replan. It's like, oh, well, we're going from a single story house to a double story house. That requires a plan. We're going from a ranch to a freaking, a log house. That requires a different plan. But then once you have that vision, okay, then it's time to start filling that in back into just constant action mode. Because you can't sit there and plan it all out. Like, you have to put actions behind it. And that's the micro adjustments along the way. Like, okay, boom, that didn't work. Boom, that didn't work. Micro. And like that allows you for more vision to get open to creating a better building than you could have envisioned. Things have been brought into my life through inertia that I would have never envisioned. Everybody can say that statement. Everybody, good and bad, And so your decision in that moment, the micro decisions, as you refer to them, is what like changes your direction. And like, that's where the magic happens, because it's like, you have a decision in every one of those micro moments to say, well, shit, I'm going to let this take me off my path and move me back towards this worse well-being, more stress, more fear, more anxiety, more unhappiness, more unfulfillment, less functionality, less attractiveness, less bounce in my step, less whistle in my walk.
Yeah.
Less singing, less hugging, less kissing, less exorbitant loving, like less positivity, less care for one's neighbor, less thinking about the fact that, this life is meant to spread light and love and treat people like fellow human beings. Like, the more you get on that path, okay, that's not the right way. Some people make micro decisions to move them towards that. It's like those micro decisions need to always move you more towards that ideal life, which I don't know anybody. Well, let's say we all know somebody who's on that path, but it's like, who really gets fulfillment out of that? Who really could say that's my ideal? My ideal life is to bitch about the president of the United States all day, every day, to my coworkers, to online, to here and this and that. Like, there's plenty to bitch about, let's be honest, but it's like, some people make that their life, dude.
Yeah. So I think I could sum that up with and I do love leading off on it with a quote, and I'll share one out. And this one I think we may have used before, but it's an oldie, it's a goodie. It's by Marcus Aurelius from his book Meditations. One of the godfathers of Stoicism. Stoicism. There you go.
Yeah.
So the impediment to action advances action. What blocks the way becomes the way. And I love that one. I carry that one near me everywhere I go. And I think it's germane to what we're talking about in terms of just making those adjustments, and it becomes part of the way, right? It advances your way. Even if it's not the path you originally saw forward, you could still proceed, even if it's at an oblique angle,
And you know what I love about Stoicism in general is their mantra. The Stoic mantra is do what you can with what you have where you are. And I love that too for the element of the planning, is because I've had the tendency, and this is what's caused a lot of, I would say, stalls in our work, was being wrapped up in this plan. Thinking of this plan. Well, it has to make sense. It has to do this. It has to do that. It has to be this. It has to be that. Sometimes you just got to dump that cement in, dude, and build that scaffolding and just start acting. And so that's why this element of the plan and the Stoicism of do what you can with what you have where you are. It's it's right here. It's right now. Now we act. Now we make micro decisions.
Don't worry. Envision the future of your ideal self, and just take steps, little steps, every single day.
I love that change. Dump the cement. You came up with a good one, man. Dump the cement. I like that. That's hot. It's good.
That's last. Dump the cement. We'll get that on a shirt. Dump the cement and have a nice, and then have a big duck in the middle, duck into the end. Have a nice duck in the end. I don't know about that one. Maybe not. We'll let everybody else decide.
We'll let creative go.
We'll see if Rick chimes in on this. Maybe he can decide. But yeah, we'll get some more merch. You saw the merch from this morning. Really, we dumped that on there. We're gonna have